Utah football lost both Sione Vaki and Cole Bishop. So how do they go about replacing two of their top players from a season ago? And Utah landed a couple of recruits in the secondary. Let's talk about it on today's Locked On Utes.
You are Locked On Utes, your daily podcast on the Utah Utes. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hello, everyone, and thank you for making Locked On Utes your first listen every single day. We are available on all platforms, including YouTube and wherever you may get your podcast. If this is your first time listening to our show, make sure you like and subscribe. Love interacting with all of you in the YouTube comments. You can also follow our show on X at Locked On Utes. Today's episode of Locked On Utes is brought to you by LinkedIn. These days, every new potential hire can feel like a high-stakes wager for your small business. That's why LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the right people for your team faster and for free. You can post your job for free at linkedin.com/LockedOnCollege. Terms and conditions do apply. My name is JT Wistrcill, former intern inside the University of Utah Athletic Department. Excited to be joined by Kevin Borrow. Most of you may know him as the Locked On Buffs host normally, but also I'm sure there are a number of you who know him as the main contributor and writer at Fan Nation All Utes. Kevin, appreciate you joining us. And, before we dive into just how Utah does go about replacing Cole Bishop and Sione Vaki, what was your reaction to Utah losing both of them on the same day?
Yeah, I honestly, Bishop, I felt was expected. I think there was like a little bit of hope of like, oh, he's going to run it back just for like old time's sake. And I feel like
that was me. I was kind of leading that charge too.
I think there's a lot of misconceptions out there that NIL is going to prevent people from going to the NFL. For some guys like Marvin Harrison Jr., who is reportedly, I don't know how accurate this number is, 20 million. We'll pretend that's real. There's not a lot of Marvin Harrison Jr.'s out there that are getting $20 million offers. Another year in college, while a lot of guys think of it as an opportunity, is another chance to hurt your draft stock. So Bishop made sense. Sione Vaki, I was a little surprised by. I thought he was kind of going to be like the cornerstone of the defense, the cornerstone of the offense next year. I was kind of expecting him to kind of push Travis Hunter for the Paul Hornung Award, where it's like the best, most versatile player. I was expecting that really, because I honestly thought he made a case late into the season. So I was like a whole season with offense and defense under his belt. But hey, nonetheless, I think you gotta ride it when you're hot. I was just at the casinos this past weekend. I won a couple hands of blackjack, and then I rode out in the sunset. I had to leave while you're hot. And so Sione Vaki kind of did just that.
It must have felt like you got good feedback from scouts or something in order to make this decision. And you're right. As good as Vaki and Bishop are, they ain't seeing that Marvin Harrison money this coming season. But it does become interesting for Utah then, replacing two guys who are two of the best at what they do in college football. And Utah got very lucky in a sense of, at the time, Cole Bishop, when he first started those final 6 games his freshman year, like they didn't know how special he was going to be. And it was kind of the same thing with Sione Vaki. We felt like he could have a breakout season, especially on defense, but I didn't expect him to right away be one of the 3 best players on this defense. And I also didn't expect him to then become a superstar for them on offense for a couple of games, at least, when he kind of had it going there. So that's where it's just like, it's hard to replace that. And I can talk about where I think offensively Utah will try to replace him in a moment. But I think defensively, when you're talking about both these guys, I think the first place I'm going to always look for Utah. And yes, there are big, we'll talk about some of the recruits and transfers and guys they brought in, but those aren't to the after watching and just like learning about them a little bit, I don't feel as confident about them as I do about the guys currently there. This is not a situation where, you bring in a Leavani Damuni who played a very high level at Stanford a year before and then comes in and starts right away. Utah did not add those guys through recruiting. Could make a difference and an impact next year, but the best candidates to replace these guys, I do think are already on the roster. I think first, when you talk about Cole Bishop, I look at a guy in Nate Ritchie, who I felt like last year was kind of this was kind of his year. He coming off his mission. It's just it takes time to get back into that shape. I think that's what this season was. We didn't see him in spring ball for those reasons. He had to get back into shape. But if we remember the guy he was in 2020, he only got to start those 5 games at strong safety, but he was sensational. I mean, he led the secondary with 28 total tackles, 4 of those for loss, 1 sack, also added a fumble recovery and a pass breakup, had a career high 7 tackles against Washington. Shout out the Utah Athletics website for those numbers. But Richie, a guy who we saw him a couple times this year, right? Had a big sack in a game, had finished the season overall with 15 tackles. And it felt like, okay, you saw the flashes of the guy to be, and that's where next year I'm hoping he can get back to that form. And I think the free safety spot, we heard a lot even before that. Coach Whittingham straight up said that Teo Johnson, who played some cornerback for Utah, would probably slot there next season. And he's a guy, because Sione, Vaki, and Cole Bishop were both best around the line of scrimmage in the box. You did see Vaki did drop back a couple times and kind of occupy that role. Had 4 passes deflected on the season, finished with over 30 tackles, still a contributor. I love the length he plays with, still just kind of learning and getting the position down a little bit, I feel like, at that level. But I like, biggest thing with these things is I want to see flashes and growth. And I thought I saw both those things from those players as the season wore on, some learning and teachable moments. Teo Johnson being a great one. He got scored on against Washington. I remember he gave up a touchdown, but he was in position to make the play. He just didn't track the ball. That's something where I'm like, okay, learn from that mistake and grow from it going into next year. I think he's capable of doing that. So to me, those are the 2 likely candidates. And as for offensively, Mekhi Bernard is the guy I look to. He was Utah's best receiving back in the past couple of years, just was hurt this year. Of course, that's one of the reasons that they needed Sione to step up. And while he's not as fast as Sione, still has some good speed on him as well. And I think that threat as a receiver and that quickness to turn the corner on the outside will be something welcome to this Utah team. So that's where I really think Utah is going to be looking just internally. And look, Jonathan Hall, another guy. There's a few other players, Britton Allen, throughout this roster that I could see like, okay, maybe they could step up and do some things. Those are the main ones, though, I'm looking at to be the 2 starting safeties. But, sometimes the best options, Kevin, aren't always inside the program. Utah could be looking to bring in some established guys, like I mentioned.
Yeah, I think I like the points you made on both the safeties that were kind of, I won't say reserves, but they weren't the guy yet. I think that's the hard part with having guys like Vaki and Bishop is there's not a lot of room for everybody else to get those reps, especially when Utah this year in particular was in a lot of close games because they were playing just about everyone who could throw the ball at quarterback this year. It felt like anyone who could throw it forward got a chance. No, I'm just kidding. The Lupatari era was a glorious era. Glorious era. No, I think realistically, Kyle Whittingham has kind of already hinted the portal is going to be their friend this year. Utah is a portal attractive team in the sense that it's an opportunity to play. NIL wise, they're not at the level of other programs. Although they do get a truck if they come to Utah. Other programs are offering a lot of money. And so Utah will kind of find themselves in between like the high spenders and the teams that just aren't attractive because they're an attractive program. You just need players that want to play football and are more so focused on that rather than kind of where I'm going to get the most bang for my buck, if you know what I mean. But I looked into some transfer portal things, and I really like Ramon Henderson. He went to Notre Dame, had some starting experience, had some playing experience, was actually – so he had 6 crystal ball predictions coming out of high school. 5 of them were to Notre Dame, and 1 of them was to Utah. And so I really think that if they want to kick the tires on an old relationship, that kind of helps. When I did my thesis, actually, when I graduated with my master's, I did it on the transfer portal, and I did it in basketball. I was focusing on the transfer portal in basketball. A lot of coaches said you recruit players even if you know you're not going to get them. So that way, if and when they enter the portal, you have that relationship. And so I think maybe, obviously that wasn't the plan here, but like that could be something that helps them out. And then also they landed a guy by the name of Rabbit from the JUCO ranks. And you got to love, first of all, I love a good JUCO player. I think realistically, JUCO guys are kind of getting overlooked right now because of all the transfer portal stuff and all the guys that have extra years of eligibility. But Rabbit is, first of all, great nickname. His real name is Maurice Evans, but I think he's someone to look out for. You don't find a lot of experience out there in the portal. There's kind of 3 guys in the portal. There's guys who want more NIL, guys who want more playing time, and then guys who need a new scene, new opportunity. A lot of guys that are kind of, I guess, in the mix or want to come to certain programs didn't have a lot of playing time. And so it's hard to find guys with college experience that translates right away. And while the JUCO level isn't the same, it is college experience. And so I'd like to value JUCO guys a little more than next man.
Yeah, I think there's definitely value in them. And we've seen a couple of guys, you've seen the stories of NFL players who have come from the JUCO ranks. And, in the past, that a lot of other schools, they've become key contributors and helped them achieve some of those goals that season. So I love that you brought him up. I actually want to talk even more about him and also a recent recruit that Utah just landed in the defensive backfield in one moment. But first, I want to talk to you guys about our friends at LinkedIn Talent Solutions. When you're hiring for your small business, you want to have as many top-tier candidates as possible to interview. That's why you have to check out LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs has the tools to help you find the right professionals for your team faster and for free. LinkedIn is super easy to use. You can set up and find great quality candidates who are ready to get to work today. And LinkedIn isn't just another job board. They have a vast network of more than 1 billion professionals, what makes it the best place to hire. Hiring is easy when you have that many qualified candidates. So easy, in fact, that 86% of small businesses get a qualified candidate within 24 hours. LinkedIn knows that small businesses are wearing so many hats and might not have the time or resources to hire. Thankfully, with LinkedIn, the process is intuitive, quick, and easy. They have just launched a feature that helps you write job descriptions, making the process even easier and quicker. So make sure you head over and post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedoncollege. That's linkedin.com/lockedoncollege, all caps, no spaces on that Locked On College code. And you go over there to post your job for free. Terms and conditions do apply. All right, Kevin, talking about those Utah players, you did a great job hitting on the rabbit. And another guy that Utah landed, and this is a Utah team that we know, Kyle Whittingham said before, they're going to be heavy in the transfer portal, but recruiting is always going to be important. And we see Utah utilizing their recruiting skills and bring in a guy in LaTristan Thompson, who comes over. He's a 3-star corner, and he's a guy as well that I think has the ability to eventually compete. I don't look at him and go, oh, he's going to be the JT Broughton replacement. Honestly, when you're talking about the Broughton replacement, I have more stock and just faith right now in like a CJ Blocker and just in general, CJ Blocker, Smith Snowden to go along with Zamiah Vaughn. That's who at the moment I expect the 3 corners to be for Utah. Long time away from next season, lots of spring ball and transfer portal stuff to work out, but that's just how I'm feeling at the moment. But just continuing to add quality players to this transfer portal class. And I do think he's a guy who's got some good instincts to, come from 24/7 Sports. They actually reported that he owns personal bests of 1072 and 1084 in the 100 meters. So you love the speed. That's one thing, especially when you're running with these. Yeah, when you're running with some of these Big 12 receivers that are going to be really athletic on the outside, that's going to be huge for this Utah team. And you already hit on the rabbit a little bit, but when you are talking about a guy who does have that experience, he totals 76 tackles to go along with 2 pass breakups and a forced fumble while he was at Blinn College. That comes to us from 24/7 Sports as well. And there were other programs interested in him, like Arkansas and Oklahoma State were close to offering him too. So it feels like 2 guys for Utah that could potentially make an impact soon. But either way, when you lose 2 key players, just in the past week, Utah's lost 3 guys in the secondary. Honestly, even 4, because if we want to include Miles Battle, he's off to the NFL with his college eligibility up. I like that Utah is focusing on the secondary right now.
Yeah, and I think especially too, I forgot to mention Oregon State transfer Jermod McCoy is another interesting name to look out for that they offered and are currently pursuing. He's going to take a visit to Texas A&M, so hopefully the NIL gods don't strike before Utah gets a chance to get in there. But yeah, in terms of who they landed, Blinn College, a very stout junior college program out here. I know the rabbit, I talked about him a little bit already. 6'2", I like his size. I think he could come in and start. Realistically, when you lose guys, you give more guys opportunities. And so right now, we're throwing out names, and it's like, yeah, so-and-so could start here, so-and-so could start there. And it's like, there's not a certain guy where we tune, like Cole Bishop, we knew was going to be a starter from the moment, like he played as a youngster, like you said, and then the next year is like, okay, Cole Bishop's ready to be a starter. We don't have that yet. They've had Cole Bishop, who we've been talking about, in that starting spot for the past few years. And so I like what the Rabbit brings to the table. I just love the nickname the Rabbit too. I think that's an underrated nickname. And then 2, you look at their most recent defensive back commit.
Yeah, it is definitely one of those things, Kevin, where you have high quality players in there that can do lots of different things if you are this Utah football team. And I do just like that Utah is focusing once again on the secondary. When you have a need that arises, can you identify it? Can you act on it quickly? the answer for Utah has been yes. When you have coaches like Sharif Shaw and Morgan Scalley, I think that is really attractive to want to play for and play with. And I think that's why you see Utah able to quickly get some more recruits and get some guys going. And I'm going to be interested as well just to see what this recruiting class ends up looking like for us. Is Kevin ready to join us once again now? Kevin, what were you saying there as we keep it rolling?
I got the boot for some reason. I was saying I love the most recent commit. Another flip, which I think is something to look out for too down the stretch here. Early signing day is December 20th. Obviously, Utah has kind of notoriously been like I would say a program that gets the recruits early and just make sure everybody stays in house. But
Actually,
I feel like
last year was insane.
yeah, I feel like they're getting a little aggressive in the flip market. It's flip miss out here, and so they just flipped Tristan Thompson. And I really like what his potential is. Is he ready to start right away? I don't know. I think that's kind of the scary part about losing Vaki and Bishop and a Miles Battle is you're losing 3 experienced starters, star players all at once. If you got the choice, I'd prefer to lose like 1 at a time, maybe 2. Yeah. But I would say watch for more flips, watch for the transfer portal. And I don't think they're done in the secondary, especially with all the guys that they're losing. I think Kyle Whittingham's going to kind of receiver and secondary. There's going to be a lot of new names to learn.
Gotta be. And I think that's where Utah is lucky right now that they don't have to dish out a crazy amount of NIL money to try and land a quarterback. That's where it's nice that you have Cam Rising coming back. I expect Brant Keithy to come back. He's another one. It's interesting, though, the longer he waits to announce his return. What were you going to say?
I was saying kind of. I don't know. I feel like we've seen them go after some tight ends in the portal, and it's like, are they looking to pair them, or are they looking for live past Brant Keithy? And it's an interesting thing to look out for. I know he has until January something to decide, but Brant Keithy is kind of like in my eyes, it's like they're operating to not replace him, but move on without him. And if they get him back, great. That's what it kind of feels like.
Because you have Landon King, who did a good job last year. So I think if anyone was going to come here, you're looking at it like, look, these guys could probably pretty easily be a better blocker than Landon is, even though I thought he improved as the season went on. But Landon showed a lot as a pass catcher. And it'd be hard for me to believe that he's not going to be on the field in some of those critical third downs situations next year. Maybe I could be wrong if you get a tight end transfer at that level, but you do make a good point. It just gets interesting the longer Brant waits. Kyle Whittingham, I think, even said on a radio interview, he expected, I believe it was ESPN 700, that he expects potentially a few more guys to go to the NFL. We've had Bishop and Vaki now move on. Obviously, Vele's there. I think Keaton Bills is one to watch for. I don't think Satawa Laumea did his social media post to announce it, but he got into the Senior Bowl. I talked about last week. We know he's gone as well. So
that's a good tell, by the way, JT. Yes. If they accept a Senior Bowl invite, that means they're done. Yeah. It just means they haven't got the graphic done.
Yeah, I know. It's been a while. It's like a week ago now. Satawa, get the graphic done. We need to get this. We give you give your flowers a little more. But this Utah team, originally started the offseason, everyone's kind of going to run it back, knowing that this year we had something taken away of. But now you see Devon Vele, Satawa, Cole Bishop, Sione, Vaki. I started, as soon as Cam announced he was back, I said Utah was the favorite to win the Big 12 next year. And when pressed, I still might say them. But I also might say Arizona right now, because I don't know if they've lost anyone major at the moment too. So how do you feel about Utah's chances at becoming Big 12 champs in their first year after losing some of the players they've lost without having totally patched up those needs yet?
Yeah, I would say Utah's probably at worst the top 3 team in the Big 12. I think Kansas State's going to be solid, even though they lost Colin Klein. I like their quarterback. I think Arizona, like you mentioned, really good. I think they arguably the hottest team in college football, and they went on this tear where they won. I think they won their last 5-ish or 6-ish games, somewhere around there.
I think so.
And majority of them are against ranked opponents. So they are peaking at the right time. I think realistically, for Utah to contend, you need wide receivers and you need secondary members, which we talked about today. I don't think we know if you told me and JT to put together the starting lineup for the wide receivers and the secondary right now, I imagine we'd probably get 1 or 2 right at each position, because I imagine the starters are not on the roster at the moment for most positions or most of those slots, just because there's a lot of portal talent out there. There's 1,200 guys still left in the portal. Utah is obviously someone who is going to make a bigger push this year. And so I think we have a lot more names to learn before we could definitively say, yeah, this is going to be the best team in the Big 12, but they're up there still.
Yeah, I mean, just like we can do it right now and then look back on it a year from now. I mean, if you're looking at the receivers for Utah, it would be Munir McClain jumps out to me for the breakout moments he had this season.
Yep.
I would say Money Parks, but once again, and this is where it's hard, is how much of Money Parks not maybe living up to the expectation. I mean, he peaked on the first play of the season. Like, no offense, but that's the reality of the situation. He has made his best play.
Downhill from there. It's only downhill from the first
exactly.
touchdown.
That was literally just how it played out. A lot of that has to do with Bryson, but how much of that is also him not separating versus coaches not utilizing him? So he's another one up in the air to me. Is like, is he a for sure starter? Moving on from there, I think Micah Pittman at the moment, but he's coming off that injury, so I don't feel good saying that, but that's just right now. Maybe if I was pressed to, I'd name. Then I already said in the secondary, Zamiah Vaughn, and then after that, I'm starting on a Smith Snowden, who did play a decent amount this year, but he'd still technically basically be a freshman in terms of getting a lot of experience on the outside. CJ Blocker, I think he completely redshirted, and then guys like Richie and then Teo Johnson, as I already mentioned, like that just. I'm with you. I would be very surprised
Teo's
if that
was
was
my lock. Teo's my lock. I don't know where he's going to start, but I feel like Teo's going to be a starter.
Teo and Zamiah. Teo and Zamiah are the two we feel really good about.
Yeah, so it's going to be like one of those things where it's like you look back and we're like, did we get any of those right? Like, I'm sure we got a couple, but like Micah Pittman, I don't know. Can he stay healthy? What is his role if they go out and get 2 other transfers? Because he's never really been at Oregon. He wasn't the guy. At Florida State, he wasn't the guy. They had Johnny Wilson. So is he meant to be like your team's best receiver? I would say no. I don't. It's nothing against him. I just don't think that's his skill set.
I think proven that. It's just
I think there's more options. There's more names in the portal that will be wearing a Utah Utes uniform come spring ball that we don't really know at the moment.
No, I agree, and it's going to be very interesting to see how the transfer portal continues to shape up for Utah. And make sure you guys keep it not just at Locked On Utes, but of course at Fan Nation as well for some more information on that. And that's going to do it for football talk, but do want to talk about the Utah women's basketball team. I touched on them briefly yesterday because Kevin, I mean, look, the Utah women's basketball team did some big things yesterday. Had to kind of lead my Monday show with the Utah men's basketball team taking care of business against those undefeated BYU Cougars at home. Because there's a pretty big deal. Formerly undefeated. Exactly. See, this is why you're on the show. I like this. See, that's what I'm talking about right there.
I think Utah, first of all, to go back to the men, I think they need to be 25th, 24th. I think they need to sneak into the rankings.
I think they've earned it.
It's time. I think they've earned it. Now, will they hold on to that ranking once Pac-12 play begins? I don't know. The Pac-12 was tough. But the women are doing great. And I was shocked at how close they kept it against South Carolina. And honestly, I thought they had chances to win that game.
They did. In fact, I want to talk about that game exactly a little bit more in a brief second. But first, I want to talk to you guys about our friends at FanDuel Sportsbook. As the weather gets colder, the NFL offers stay hot on FanDuel. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 moneyline bet. That's $150 if your team wins. If you've been thinking about joining FanDuel, there's no better time to get in on the action. The app is easy to use. They use a wide range of betting options, including the spreads, player props, over-unders, and more. So you can visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and kick off the NFL season. FanDuel, an official partner of the NFL. And Kevin, by the time we're recording this, the Monday night games haven't even gotten underway yet. But is there a matchup maybe next week in the NFL you have your eye on, maybe potentially?
Honestly, those weekday games are just so bad. Like I feel like we've been struggling with weekday games. But let me take a little look. See,
the Thursday matchup is abysmal. I will say. I think it's like not Chargers Broncos, but the Chargers Raiders. I think it's just and at the beginning of the year, you thought there was maybe some potential for some excitement, but that's just not the case.
I like the Dolphins because we got tonight on Monday. We got a 2 for special. So we're going Packers, Giants, and then the Titans, Dolphins tonight. And I like anything Tyreek Hill related. I like it. I just do.
Okay. Make sure you guys keep that in mind for next week by the time you listen to this. And if Tyreek goes off, Kevin, you're looking like a genius. So there you go. But like you said, focusing back to the women's basketball team, it's always a bummer when you lose. But when you lose to 9-0 undefeated South Carolina on a neutral site, no Gianna Neepkins as we know all season, and you give them a game, you play them close. Just incredible stuff from Utah. I was so impressed by them, especially after South Carolina jumped out to a 27-16 lead. So you're like, okay, is this going to snowball into something worse? And yet Utah is able to hang in tough. And speaking of Alissa Pili, 37 points. You said it yourself before we even jumped on the air, Kevin, how hard that is to do in college basketball. Just an incredible feat by her. And also you get players like Deja Young who always bring the toughness. She had 12. And Utah only got 2 points from their bench in this game. and they only lost by 9. I think that's incredible, and a huge credit to Lynn Roberts and the staff. And look, that South Carolina team very well may win the national championship this year. They're undefeated for a reason. They're that good. They'll have to run into Caitlin Clark. LSU's kind of got their issues going on right now, but we'll see what ends up shaking out with them too. But this team, the Utah women's basketball team, even though they don't have Gianna, they're going to be a pain in a lot of people's sides, and it's going to be tough for them to win the Pac-12, but I don't think you can take them out of that conference race, especially not in the conference tournament where all you need to do is get hot in a couple games.
Yeah, and I think the biggest question for them is who steps up to replace Gianna. You lost. Yeah. She is averaging 17.8 points per game. That's basically 18 points. So where are you getting those additional 18 points? And now, obviously, Alissa answered that question herself, but I don't know how sustainable 37 points is on 23 shots a game. I don't know if that's sustainable. And then getting 2 points from the bench, not great either. And Utah, I think, was already a thin team before Gianna went down. Realistically, if you look at the minutes distributions, it's on the bench. It's 9, 2, 1, 3, and 16. So they were about a 7-person rotation anyway. So losing one of your 7 wasn't ideal. But yeah, I think if they could stay hot shooting, because they didn't shoot well last night. They went, last night. Sorry, I forgot when the game was. 5 for 20 from 3 isn't gonna win you many games. And so you get a little bit better from 3, and kind of prevent teams from staying hot on offense, because South Carolina, I mean, no one's going to prevent them from staying hot, but allowing someone to shoot 55% is not a recipe for success.
No, you're absolutely correct. I think when you're looking at those players, you have to step up for this Utah team. It is a Kennedy McQueen. Vieira is another one that you would love. Palmer, another one too, seeing her get back and just really establish herself as an elite guard, I think would be great for this team. But it's curious to see who steps up. This is still a team that, look, it's their second loss now, so they'll stumble a little bit in the rankings. When you play South Carolina close within 10, I do think it's a team that still deserves to be in the rankings, but we'll see where that does fall at. And it's going to be interesting to watch this Utah women's basketball season all year. And just Kevin in general, once, like we talked about the men's team, like both the women's team was obviously already trending in a good direction after what they did last year, but the men's team has already surprised me with what they've been able to do so far this year. And I just think in general, basketball inside the Huntsman it's a pretty good time. And the best we've seen both teams be at the same time in a long time now.
Yeah, and I think especially for the women's team, they have this 2-game stretch right here where they're going Southern Utah, Weber State. Obviously, they should win both those games by a bajillion points. But that's a perfect time for someone, whether it be on the bench or maybe another role player who emerges into a role. So look for someone to kind of take that next step, because then they dive right into number 8 Colorado to start Pac-12 play, which is going to be a crazy matchup. And then for the men's side too, it's all about sustaining their good play, because we've seen them. They obviously played well against BYU, but then we saw them earlier in tournament play where it was like, okay, this isn't the team I thought we were going to get the whole year. They lose to Houston. I thought they had a chance to win that game, but they kind of played themselves out of the game. I haven't really seen them play a game and I'm like definitively like that team was better. I've seen them play games and play themselves out of games more so than like that team was definitively better. Now, Houston down the stretch might be a different story. That was about 4 games into the season, but you know what I'm saying? Like they have to not shoot themselves in the foot is, I guess, my main point.
It's a great point, and it's going to be interesting to see how Craig Smith and co are able to kind of make sure they don't beat themselves, because once they go against the Arizonas of the world, the teams that are UCLA's, the teams that are straight up more talented than you, that's a surefire way to lose those games if you do end up beating yourself. So very curious to see how Utah does competing against this team, especially because Utah did beat Arizona last year. That's what's still crazy to look back on. As I talked about on my show yesterday, I felt like that win got swept under the rug because they did it on either, I can't remember if it was the night of, or I think it was the day before that Utah won their second Pac-12 championship. But this one, obviously all eyes were on Utah against BYU, and they took care of business. So it was great to see them get some shine. But Utah athletics are in a good place with you right now, whether it's the football team's recruiting or both the men's and women's basketball team. Lots of good things going on at Utah. Once again, make sure you guys head over and check out Kevin on Twitter at Kevin_Bora. And you can check out all of his great work at Fan Nation All Utes. Kevin, appreciate you joining us.
Thank you for having me.
That's going to do it for today's edition of Locked On Utes. But we'll be back with more recruiting news via the transfer portal and players committing to Utah on tomorrow's Locked On Utes.